Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly thank our sponsors, Neximo. Neximo provides some really great communication-based development tools, including APIs for SMS, voice, and virtual phone numbers if you ever wanted to order a pizza overseas. Thanks, Neximo, for sponsoring us. I'm your host, Jessica Rose.
I'm here today with
Rachel Nabors, Senior UX Designer and Web Animation Specialist, author of the Animation at Work ebook out with A Book Apart.
So you literally wrote the book on animation.
I wrote a book on animation. There's another one from Rosenfeld by Val Head.
Okay, you and Val Head literally wrote the books on animation.
Yeah, I like the way that sounds. And if you want to learn about SVG animation, Sarah Drasner wrote that book. So there are a lot of books about animation out there these days, and they happen to be written by women, which makes me very happy. It's good company to be in.
So today we're going to be talking about animation, but we're also going to be talking about relocation. I think you've recently made sort of a big change in your life.
Yes, I moved to the Netherlands. I now live in Amsterdam. I have a little official residence permit in my passport and everything. It's kind of exciting to now have the equivalent of a social security number in another country. Very like, oops, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening kind of moment.
So social security number, I think, implies that you've come from the US and now you're in Amsterdam.
That is correct. And here it's called, I think, a burger service number. And it's sort of the way that you are referenced within the system and makes you like a legitimate person who reports and gives taxes and that sort of thing. So
I am very excited that it's called the burger service number.
Does it make you think of hamburgers?
I'm ashamed to say immediately did, yes.
That's where my mind went with it as well. But it was exciting being at the expat center and having them give me my little card and everything. And there was just a little moment of like tears in my eyes. And I'm not the only person who felt that way. A colleague of mine was like, "Did you get the tears in your eyes?" And I was like, "Yes, I did. You did too." That was exciting. It's definitely something I've always wanted to do, living abroad.
So we're going to chat a bit about animation and then come around to this because I think maybe many of our listeners, or maybe everyone out there in the world, has dreamed about running away from home at one point. And making the professional jump to run away from home seems pretty exciting.
It is. And it requires thinking about a lot of different things, like what you want. It's not the same working on your career in another country. For instance, in the EU, you're going to make substantially less than you would in a country like the United States, which has lower taxes and tends to have higher salaries. But you get a different life experience for it. So there are trade-offs. It's not like you're just running off to have a good time somewhere. You're going to be adopting a different way of life. You're probably going to have to learn some new languages unless you're heading to a place where English is the primary language. I mean, even in the Netherlands, most people speak English, but if you want to have a really good time, you got to be a person who likes knuckling down and learning something new and challenging, which personally, I just adore studying languages. So this is like, yes, take me to a place where I have to learn something to read the signs. I'm very excited about that. But it does require you to be in the right frame of mind at the right time.
So I know that your experience is going to be very, very selective. You're able to talk specifically like, hey, coming from the US to Amsterdam. But if I wanted to, I have a couple of times, or if our dear listener wanted to leave and run away from home and go work in a new country, where might they start?
That's a great question. I can't give one-size-fits-all advice here, but I can talk from my own experience that for me, what really helped was that I had traveled and spoken internationally for 5 years before making this decision. And I'd made many friends across the EU, even in the UK, even though I don't go to the UK very much, except I will be going to the UK for Scotland CSS this year. This is going to be fun.
Oh.
I'll see everyone in July.
You're going to be in Scotland in July for Scotland CSS.
You got it. I'll be giving a keynote.
I will be emceeing and introducing you to that keynote. So if anybody out there is a diehard fan of the Pursuit podcast and Rachel's work, you should probably get yourself to Scotland, if it's possible.
There are going to be so many selfie opportunities. You don't want to miss it.
And it's in beautiful Edinburgh. Everybody deserves a trip to beautiful Edinburgh.
I can't wait to see it. Anyway, it really helped me when I was considering different opportunities in countries outside the United States to look at where I had the most support, where I had people who were working at the companies I was applying for. And I had a lot of people in this area that I was friends with already or who would be happy to meet me and come visit me in Amsterdam. So that made Amsterdam high on my list of places to come to. Very cosmopolitan. It's a great place to travel from. It's a place where everybody wants to come visit you. So you spend less time traveling to meet your friends and family. They spend more time traveling to see you. It works out pretty well. And this also gives me insights to the local economy. Especially if you're traveling with a partner, this is important because you won't just be looking at your own role, you'll be looking at finding a role for your partner as well, usually. So it helps to have pre-established networks. So you're not just jumping into a new community feet first without any kind of a social safety net. Establishing that social safety net ahead of time can really help you determine where you want to go and who you want to spend your time with.
And I think making friends before you make a jump to a role overseas, that seems reasonable enough.
It does, but you'd be surprised how many people just wake up one morning and are like, you know what, I really got to go live in Tokyo. I don't know anybody there, but I'm going to make it happen.
Oh, that's exactly what I did, except for
Oh,
Kansai
you
instead of
did?
Tokyo.
Oh my gosh, how'd that go?
It went okay, yeah. It's also possible you'll be a little bit isolated for a little while.
That can be true. I happen to be working with Booking, which is a company full of expats. So it's sort of like a big, happy expat family. Probably if you've ever worked in the military, it might seem a little familiar because most times, especially with the American military, it's people from all over the country and its territory. It's just kind of thrown together and you've got this kind of a sink or swim, we all got to be a family here attitude. And so that can happen when you work for large international companies that have large international workforces. You kind of get a social network right out of the box. But if you're going to work for a smaller company that has more people who are local working at it, you might find that you have to do quite a bit more legwork to get that kind of social safety net around you. And that means doubling down on the meetups. That means going out of your way to make friends and join expat groups, getting out into the community. And that can be an introvert's nightmare. So, know your limits. Understand those things going in. Will social opportunities be easy or will you have to put in extra effort? And are you okay with that?
This all seems like really solid advice. What about Amsterdam specifically? If you wanted to say, hey, you out there in not radio land, but podcast land, if you want to come to Amsterdam, remember this.
The housing market is really tight. I think there's something like 4.5% availability at any given time, and it can be harrowing. Now, sometimes you get a special relo package where you're going to have a realtor looking out for you and helping you out. And that's great if you get it. But if you don't get it, expect it to be a firefight to find a place to live. And in fact, there was a time when I was looking for places to stay when I moved here where I genuinely felt like this is too hard. Like if I expected the real estate market to be like this for rentals, where you can find very little that's affordable short notice, I would have gone to the Bay Area because at least they have the salaries to match. like in Amsterdam, it's very hot and up and coming because it's really situating itself as being the technology hub of the EU right now is trying. So there's a lot of people coming in. A lot of people want to be here. It's the place to go. The real estate market is just groaning under the accelerating prices. And as you can tell, with only that much vacancy available at any given time, it's tough. But if you can find your place to sit before the music stops, as it were, if anyone's ever played musical chairs before, it's a good place to be.
Fantastic. If you're going in someplace new, go ahead and check out whether or not they're having a bit of a real estate crunch. And if you're heading into San Francisco, Berlin, Amsterdam, London to a lesser extent, make your peace with quite a bit of hassle.
Yes, if possible, enlist a professional.
I think this makes a lot of sense. So we've touched on culture shock and we've talked about needing to have a support network, either one that you build ahead of time or one that you build when you get there. I'm really interested in also touching on the work you're going to be doing out there and the larger work you do. So you mentioned that you wrote a book?
Yes, I wrote a book called Animation at Work for the great publishers at Book Apart. It was my life stream to have a book out with them. It's the one with the lavender cover because I was really into lavender at that time. In my book, I go into a lot about how animation scientifically decreases cognitive load, dispel a lot of myths about, animation isn't necessary, animation isn't accessible. There are a lot of confusing ideas around animation, ranging all the way from, we should use animation everywhere and have parallax on all the things because that just makes things more delightful, doesn't it? All the way to we should not use animation on all the things. It sucks the battery. Nobody asked for this. Why would you do that? We don't have enough time. Where can we fit this in? So it's a good book for just bringing the entire team around to here's what it is, here's how to prioritize it, and here's how to do it effectively, which is surprisingly not that difficult because setting limitations is one of the best things you can do when using animation in your workflow.
I'm going to walk way back because you talked about the value of animation to reduce cognitive load. Can you talk a little bit about what cognitive load is? What does that mean?
Cognitive load, I'm going to use a computer metaphor here.
Oh, yes.
Cognitive load is like how much of your CPU you're using at any given time. So sometimes, your laptop feels really hot and you open up the activity center and you see, oh my gosh, I've got 50 Chrome tabs open and you're using 100% of your CPU right now. And wow, there's really not much room on your computer to do anything else because it's so preoccupied with just those tabs. The human mind kind of works in a similar way. The more things that are going on, the more things your brain has to keep tabs on. You hear what I did there? Dad joke.
Yeah.
The more things that your brain is having to track, the harder it is for people to stay on task. They get distracted. They have too much going on. It can be easy for them to lose track of what is happening and be like, what just happened there? I don't know.
Yeah.
And when you hear what just happened there, it's usually a sign that you can go in and clarify something in your interface. And sometimes animation can really help reduce that load by clarifying cause and effect, moving people throughout the information space, moving them on and off of tasks, and simply clarifying relationships between elements on the page.
That's a really, really fantastic point, talking about how you can use design and you can use animations as part of this to reduce cognitive load. And I think this is something that we don't think about a lot in technology. When we're designing experience, we often ask, what can we expect out of this browser? What performance can we expect from these types of devices? I very rarely hear people stop and reflect on how can we reduce the demand on our users as they interact with these often vital services.
I do actually hear people talk about that. I think Amber Case wrote a book called...
I hang out with the wrong people.
Well, I'm going to give you some good people to hang out with. Amber Case wrote a book about calm technology. It's all about building technology that demands less from users, that kind of keeps them calm by disappearing into the background of their lives. And I really love this idea that the technology we surround ourselves with should just sort of disappear into the background. And when it comes to visual interfaces, animation can definitely help things disappear. I say the best animations are the ones that nobody notices. But of course, you can use blink tags and parallax to make the animation really stand out. And sometimes you want that, but for the most part, the most effective animations in interfaces are going to be the ones that nobody notices because they keep people focused on what they're trying to do. You just want the users to accomplish what they came for, not to be oohing and aahing over your very clever thing that you did with this illustration.
I think that a lot of listeners who are old school web nerds just had the same emotional response to that I did. You're saying, oh, well, you could use blink tags. I was like, yeah, if you wanted to be a bit distracting. Oh.
Well, that depends. Are you trying to alert people to someone trying to burglarize their vacation house? You might want to use a blink tag on that so that they become more aware of serious things that do need to interrupt their attention span. But for the most part, you probably want to kick back a little bit. Animation is a many splendid thing, but it's one part of the interaction piece. One of the things I've noticed working on various teams is that they tend to not notice animation because the tools they're using, especially when you have people mocking things up in Photoshop and Sketch, their tools don't really think of animation. So animation isn't really considered at the design stage of the process. And so by the time it gets to the front-end developers, you've got front-end developers being like, well, this seems a little static compared to an app. Maybe I should add some animation. So they poke some animation on it, and before you know it, you've got like a weird button that bounces over here and a modal that slides in from over there. And this happens on mobile too. It happens no matter where you're designing. But if the animation is left to the developers or left out of the design system, it gets to be higgledy-piggledy. It's all over the place. And that can create a very discordant experience for users because they don't know. It feels like they're kind of on this patchwork quilt of an interface. Is this the same app? Why did that thing come in from that area? That other thing didn't.
Yeah.
And it can be confusing, alarming, and make the experience feel cheap or untrustworthy. So animation has to be done right, and it has to be done consistently.
That's a really, really interesting point. And that seems like something that's going to be a big takeaway from this conversation we're having. Whereas like animation is fantastic, but from what you're saying, it needs to be used in a thoughtful way. And just as important as the thoughtfulness in its use and execution, using it consistently across an experience.
Exactly. I like to think of animation as a bit like typography. It should be invisible. It should be very similar. Like you don't want to just throw new fonts onto the page because, Comic Sans looks friendly. This is a friendly interface. Let's just use that here. It has a cost load, like you're loading fonts into the page. It costs to do that. There's extra kilobytes of data being sent downstream for that. You want to make it worth their users' while, that you're taking up not just their time, but their data plan for this sort of thing. And thus, I pretty much say that, would you do this with a font? Would you make this font bigger? Would you make this animation louder? There's a lot of one-to-one relationships you can make with typography and animation. It's cute.
So when you think about animation being used and used effectively in technology tools, who do you imagine, what kind of roles do you imagine advocating for this technology use? Largely designers, largely people who are in front-end development?
That's a great question. So I like to say that animation sits squarely at the intersection of UX, front-end development, and design. And if there is any discordance or a lack of communication or something's not right in one of those contributors, then it's going to show up in the animation. For instance, if the designers aren't working with prototyping tools that support animation, then it's going to fall on the front-end developers to implement it. If designers are using prototyping tools, but they're coming up with really over-the-top animations, front-end developers might have trouble getting good performance out of them. If the UX people are advocating it, but neither of those two teams are actually able to have the time to implement it, then you won't see them showing up on the end. And that makes you ask, well, why don't these teams have enough time? How do we build this into the process so there is a budget for this? So it's interesting. Any one of these three can run with animation and make it a part of their deliverables. But typically, it's best when all three of them work together, which is how animation ends up becoming a necessary part of a balanced design system.
I love that. Hang on. Talk to me a little bit more. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but talk to me a little bit more about a balanced design system.
Oh, no problem. I love how animation is showing up in some of the best design systems. Material design, I think, was the first one. This one from Google was the first design system that actually put animation front and center. Well, at least it was the first one that really blew up. And I got to so thank the people at the Google design team that went out of their way to make meaningful animation a part of their design system, because that got everybody thinking, we do design a lot with animation in our apps and now increasingly on the web, thanks to CSS animations and GreenSock. Maybe we should be putting animation there too. And you can see it in design systems like Salesforce's Lightning design system, which I had the honor to be a part of for a brief period of time when I was consulting. I really loved a lot of the ideas that came from that team, including the idea of using a timing scale to ensure that all animations could be choreographed with each other to last certain durations. So the same way we would use a different hex code for a similar looking color of blue all over the place. And then, we got SAS, we started using variables, and now we just have the one color of blue that's used everywhere instead, significantly reducing code. The same thing happens with animation durations. You have, this one's going to make it 300 milliseconds, no, 400 milliseconds, 350, etc. Having a timing scale where people just use a single unit, depending on if they want fast, fastest, or slow. And that is a very helpful thing. They created an entire language and vocabulary for demonstrating the different kinds of animations that were available, and broke all of these down into subcomponents that could be reconfigured and make larger patterns from them. It really enabled front-end developers to add animation into the things that they were building without constraining them too much on where or how. So that was a really fantastic example of how to enable developers to use animations by designers making useful defaults available to them from the get-go.
No, that sounds like a really, really fantastic development. It's relatively recent, I think.
Yes, it just keeps gaining speed. I think I was involved in that in 2015, 2016, I forget which, but it's just grown in popularity and it's become used throughout more and more of Salesforce. And so I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Lightning Design has been a tremendous success.
I think that I'm going to take away from this is these thoughtful approaches and these thoughtful, sort of clearly communicated to the larger tech community approaches to design and approaches to animation have been an incredibly valuable thing to look out for, and also to eat more pudding.
Yes, you can never eat enough pudding.
And if I'm a new designer or front-end dev, or I'm in any of these roles that you talked about who should be working collaboratively on animation, what if I'm new, or what if I'm in a space where I've not really been exposed to a lot of animation, or maybe if I admit it out loud, maybe I've not been exposed to a lot of animation that I feel was thoughtful and measured. Where are some places, aside from your fabulous book, and maybe we could list the other books you mentioned again, where are some resources on animation that I can start to dig into?
Well, first off, I would say your very first stop should be to talk to other people on your team to see who there is into animation, if anyone. You should always start by investigating the people around you because they may have been working with animation for a long time and haven't really had the chance to bring that front and center. You might find out that, oh, Cassandra actually did all the motion design for our app, or Bob has been doing animation on banners since he had his first job, and he's really chomping at the bit to bring that into the overall design of your site. So it's a good idea to start by asking at home.
So very much like before you're looking to do a move to a new country, check and see what beautiful humans exist in your network who care about you. When you're looking to really ramp up in animation, look in your immediate environment and see which beautiful humans you already have in your life who care about animation.
Yes, especially on your team. You can tell that I'm a person who works by building relationships with others first. I think that's a special communication style. But if you want to get started outside that, let's say you look around your team and you find out, nobody here is really interested in animation. Or you look around your team and you find out, oh my gosh, we're all into animation and we need to create an animation fan club. A good place to go after that is to check out this site called motionographer.com. It is a showcase of the best motion design from the motion design industry. Motion design, by the way, is like a subculture of graphic design that specifically centers around using animation in commercial settings. A lot of the commercial ads you see are done by people who are motion designers. And you'll find motion design and interaction design tend to team up for really great immersive experiences, especially in places like the emerging AR and VR markets.
I'm imagining like a really cool, really laid back, nerdy superhero team slowly forming.
Yes. I love that image. I just love the idea that that is how things could be. Another resource you could use, I have a newsletter, webanimationweekly.com. It's now called Animation at Work. We're switching over to calling it the Animation at Work newsletter. But if you go to webanimationweekly.com, you can sign up and you will get all the best news in this space delivered to your inbox.
That is webanimationweekly.com.
You got it. And if you would like to join the biggest, most friendly Slack in the world devoted to animating things on the web, in apps, here, there, everywhere, for fun and for profit, I highly recommend you check out slack.animationatwork.com. It is one of the most warm, welcoming communities. I started it myself. We've worked really hard to create a group of people that will welcome you, talk to you about your tech problems, talk to you about your stack problems, talk to you about how you get started on working this into your workflow and building better user interfaces with animation.
A lot of our conversation seems to be focused around great communication with other people and just being roundly lovely.
Yes, I think these are things that perhaps tech has overlooked in the past. But the best work is often done with friends and with good communication. If you're not speaking, I can't tell you how many times I come into a system and find out things are all over the place, not because they were broken or people didn't know better, but simply because people weren't talking to each other and listening in earnest. And it's weird how many times I feel like just having a good therapist in the room would help us get more done faster.
Cool. I'm going to wait patiently. And as soon as we've got a tech team having therapists on site, I'm going to go ahead and get them on as well.
I have a saying, always look for a manager who has experience with psychology, whether he took many courses on it in college or university, or that used to be his former job or her former job. Managers with a psychological background tend to be really attuned to the various human underpinnings that keep teams running or cause discord within them.
This seems like fantastic advice. So we've kind of come through a little bit about looking at your very recent move and then moved on to talk about the body of your work and some really incredible spaces where you've built communities around sharing knowledge on this. So folks being able to sign up for your newsletter at animationweekly.com or being able to come to the Slack. I'd like to sort of circle back around and talk a little bit more about relocation. How long have you been in Amsterdam now?
5 weeks. Well, maybe 6 weeks.
Oh, you're like an expat baby.
I am. I haven't made it past the honeymoon period yet.
Summer will do that. You'll be fine. It gets busy and loud.
Yes, I can imagine. But really what I'm looking forward to is the gray doldrums of winter where it will be rainy and super dark, which is not unlike the Pacific Northwest that I moved here from, having recently left Portland/Seattle. I can do this. I feel ready.
I love Portland/Seattle like they're one conceptual unit now.
Well, for me, I'd lived in Portland for several years. I bolted up to Seattle to do some work with Microsoft. And then I jumped back to Portland for a few months before heading out here. So for me, the whole Pacific Northwest area, it got rolled into one. They are two distinct things, but given the way I zigzagged between Seattle and Portland so quickly like that, it kind of like, yeah, I love them both. I'd go back to them both in a heartbeat.
They're all home.
Yeah.
From your 5 weeks in Amsterdam, if I was moving to Amsterdam tomorrow, aside from saying like, oh, well, it's going to be a nightmare to get a flat, what else would you warn me about, or what else would you encourage me to see or do or try?
Man, like, I don't feel like I have been here long enough, especially given that you have a multicultural listening audience. I imagine you've got people from all over the world listening. I feel like all of the things I would say have to do specifically with being an American. For instance, well, look out if you have asthma because everybody here smokes and you can't get away from it. And
in Amsterdam.
Oh yeah, Europe smokes a lot. And in Amsterdam, like, it's a beautiful sunny day. Everyone is sitting out at the cafes and they're all smoking. So you're going to get smoke in your eyes, whatever you do. So you got to get used to it, or you got to be okay with it. If you have severe asthma problems, you might not actually like it compared to a place like the United States where smoking in public is mostly not allowed in most locations. Like, they make the poor smokers go across the parking lot.
I'm going to politely posit places like the Pacific Northwest. I spent a lot of time down south, and I think I still used to see quite a bit of smoking outside.
Yeah, but in some places, but even down south, like I was in Raleigh, North Carolina around 5 years ago.
I was in Raleigh, North Carolina.
When did you leave?
About 10 years ago.
So they
old.
made it illegal to smoke in public in the passing 5 years that you weren't there.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I remember people smoking in the mall at one point in North Carolina.
Not allowed.
Just to date myself.
The war on cigarettes has spread across the United States, and there's no take-backsies.
But hasn't quite get to Amsterdam.
Yeah, and no smoking in the bars in Raleigh, North Carolina either. Cigar bars have to apply for special licenses. So, yeah.
But no smoking in the bars in Amsterdam. Well, no smoking in the non-coffee shop bars in Amsterdam, I think.
No smoking inside, but you can smoke outside all you want.
There we go. Boof.
But I'm not sure that's the kind of thing that you were asking me about. I honestly am still getting my feet, so I don't know what other advice I would have to give people. That is tough and deeply personal.
That's fair. Is there anything in Amsterdam that's been surprising and cool where you're like, hey, if you relocate here, make sure to go have French fries because they're fancy and amazing? Or your own version?
If you relocate here, make sure you get a bike and plot a trip to the beach on your bike. You're going to be surprised how many specifically bike roads there are in Amsterdam where there are no cars. It's just people on their bikes, and you can pedal for 2-3 hours just seeing the beautiful countryside and then arrive at some magical spot that you never would have known existed. It's completely different from traveling by locomotive. It's a lot of fun to do with friends and family, and it's a great bonding experience. So find someone you care about and go on a bike ride together out to the beach.
So fantastic. Amsterdam, make your peace before going to war with the local real estate market.
Yes.
If you've got asthma or you really have a lot of objections to people smoking in public, maybe also make your peace, but also enjoy the glorious bicycle infrastructure.
Yes, the bicycles reign supreme here. There are pedestrians, there are cars, and then there are bicycles, which trump all above. But once you get your bicycle and you get used to riding it, you'll find that it's wonderful. There is so much space not spent on parking that is devoted to storage of bicycles. It's amazing to just see how much more people in the Netherlands are able to fit into small spaces because they do not have as many cars as other cities.
Did you wind up with a lavender bicycle to match your lavender book?
I love that idea. If I can find a lavender bicycle, I am going to do that.
Rachel, thank you so much again for joining us. Just to recap, where can people find your communities online?
You can find my communities at slack.animationatwork. You can sign up for my newsletter at webanimationweekly.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Rachel Nabors. Love to hear from you. And you can find my book at abookapart.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again for joining us, and I'll see you in July in Scotland for Scotland CSS.
Thank you so much. I can't wait.
And thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to keep up with what we're doing at the Pursuit Podcast, you can find us on Twitter at PursuitPod. We'll see you next Tuesday with a brand new episode.